Hi, Rebecca. Hi.
Hi.
So
How's it
here,
going?
good. So here with me today on the Matt Weiner podcast show, and the first guest ever is one of the top swimmers in U.S. Olympic history, Rebecca Soni. She has medaled in 2 Summer Olympic Games, broken 8 world records, and is now a mentor to athletes. So thank you so much for coming on and being the first ever.
That's exciting. I didn't realize it was the first ever. I'm super honored.
It's so last minute and kind of thrown together that we're using Xbox games to hold up the stand for the mic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Um, so first question. So which classes at USC have helped the most post swim career when it comes to your mentor program?
Well, it's been a few years since I was in college, but I majored in communication, which was not necessarily for someone who loved math and science. It was a bit of a challenge, but it turned out to be very helpful. I don't remember specific classes per se, but generally spending a lot of time learning a lot more about the communication world, media, journalism really helped to approach the way I approached professional sports. Because obviously a big part of that, it's not just swimming, it's how you present yourself. It branched into branding, and sponsors are more interested in you if you're branded and social media and all these things. And so I would just say the whole communication major ended up really being helpful for what I was doing in swimming, and even now after swimming.
Oh, okay. So what made you switch over from being originally more STEM than humanities?
Honestly, it was credits. I had switched majors a few too many times trying to find what I wanted to do, and my time had kind of run up given that I was on scholarship for swimming, and I needed to adhere to the criteria for maintaining that scholarship. So it just ended up being that I wanted to graduate in 4 years' time, and I knew I didn't know what I wanted to do, so communication seemed like a good fit for that.
Okay, well, it all works out in the end. So
Sure.
yeah, so now that we're kind of going on to the topic of you brought up scholarships. One of the biggest questions I've had since swimming is still kind of brand new to me in the sports world is how athletes are able to go to the Olympics, but also be in college, especially like.
Mhm.
So how does that work with the NCAA? What are the guidelines you have to follow?
Well, you can go to the Olympics. You can be on any national teams, and I'm speaking just for swimming. I'm not sure if other sports are different. However, you cannot. You must maintain your amateur status, which means you can't have sponsors. You can't have um, any sort of deals or payment outside of, I guess, your scholarship, which comes from the school. So you have to turn down a lot of opportunities. And there's a lot of fine lines for that. You can still do appearances but not get paid. I think, again, it's been a little bit of time, but certainly no money coming in from doing your sport. Now, once you graduate or give up your eligibility to compete in college, which means no more scholarship, then you can accept sponsor money and do the appearances and so on.
Oh, okay. So now, kind of moving towards the topic of athletes and money, especially student athletes and money. What is your whole opinion? What is your take on student athletes getting paid?
Um, let's see. I'm not totally sure. I feel like if going back to when I was in college, I had a stipend from the USA national team, which was
Mm-hmm.
fairly small, um, and this small stipend from my scholarship as well that basically allowed me to get by, considering that I was on scholarship, and that was already a huge thing from the school. So it helped me to, just maintain the ability to, live on my own, I
Yeah.
suppose. But do I think that athletes should be paid more than like what they basically need to get by for a college
Mm-hmm.
student lifestyle? No,
Mm-hmm.
I think college is meant to be about college and not necessarily about what you're doing outside of college. So as long as it remains focused on your experience and what you're doing for the school, then I think a little bit in order to survive is good.
Yeah, going back to that, a lot of athletes are going to hate me for this, but I have to agree with you. After my dad, who you have a relationship with, was a former USC swimmer, kind of gave me a walkthrough of not only just of the aquatics, but also the whole entire just sports programs and whatnot. And I mean, everything you're offered from the tutoring to just the education as well that you're getting from these D1 schools, it just seems like it's enough.
Yeah, there are so many services, there are so many things right at your fingertips, from the doctors to the recovery facilities and weight room. You really have all that you need there. It's just a matter of utilizing it, and that's something I wish I'd even utilized it even further than I did. So yeah, the D1 schools tend to have great opportunity for athletes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the crazy part is that a lot of schools drop athletes as soon as they get hurt. Now, does USC kind of do the same thing? How does USC handle career-ending injuries?
I'm not sure I'm equipped to answer that because I did not have one, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not exactly certain. I know that what I did, I can only speak from experience, that I had a heart condition that needed medical treatment, and it was not a career ending like your question
Mm-hmm.
asked, but they gave me the tools and the resources and connections to do what I needed to do to take care of that and return to my sport. So I'm not equipped to answer your question fully
Oh,
because
okay.
I don't necessarily know.
Well, I mean, thank God you didn't have to find out, right?
That is true. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So on your blog, you talk a lot about learning from your setbacks, such as the heart issue that you mentioned earlier and back surgery. What were mistakes made from previous athletes that you know of that were eye openers to you and kind of paved a way to know don't do this?
Um, Good question. I was a very observant athlete, and
Mm-hmm.
very early on, I had a um, keen eye out on my older sister on what
Okay.
she was doing, and even some of the other older kids on the team back when I was just a young one.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I noticed and helped, gear my perspective towards mindset is I watched a lot of these older athletes being really, really upset with themselves after competitions,
Mm-hmm.
being really hard on themselves on performance, often tears at a young age, or
Mm-hmm.
and even at an older age
Yeah.
are pretty frequent. So I know that at some point I kind of shut that off because it didn't
Mm.
seem very productive.
Interesting.
If
Okay.
the race is over, there's no reason to be crying about it. Granted, I have, of course, had a few moments where I've had to cry about races, but
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely one thing that I noticed very early on that shifted and kind of shut off for me.
Yeah. So you talk about crying about races throughout your career. Does a race you lose in elementary school back in New Jersey, is that the same as losing something in the national championships, the NCAA national championships or Olympics? Does that pain of losing ever change?
Yes, it did for
Mm-hmm.
me. I didn't have much pain of losing when I was younger because
Yeah.
I didn't care all that much.
Okay.
And that was, I think it was a good thing. And obviously, as I developed as an athlete, there was more pressure, expectation. Later on in my career, it became financial, it
Mm-hmm.
became losing out a spot on the Olympic team. These things carry a lot more weight. And so for me, it certainly did change, although to some extent, if you're an athlete who cares immensely about your sport, even at a young age, I could see how the pain would be very similar.
Well, I like how you talk about you don't care as much because one of my favorite Kobe quotes is that he, and just kind of things he says a lot, are play like you're a kid, to where there's no consequences. You're just out, whether it's on the recess, on just recess basketball, or if it's the NBA finals, just play as if you're a kid. And I like how you touch on that, because too soon I score keep at a little league field, and I just watch all these parents ruin their kids' lives by just taking it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the concept of play is an interesting one, especially as a swimmer.
Mhm.
We'll often joke that other athletes get to play their sport, but we have to, like, do our, so there's no game in
Mhm.
swimming, but there are ways to cultivate that fun and bring that into both training and racing. I think you're absolutely right, and especially for me, college racing and competing was so fun because it was a team environment where swimming is pretty independent, and you travel as a team. It just brought so much more fun to it. I did not compete for my high school team. I swam club, so it was already
Okay.
a different environment coming into college and experiencing that team unity. And when you get a little bit older, if you go into professional sports, all of a sudden it's your job. So there's so much expectation, and I can only imagine, professional basketball and football, the dollar signs are much different, the pressure is much different, the purpose changes, and it becomes more just like hold on and survive than just play. And I think on a subconscious psyche level, as soon as more pressure is placed, we start to take things more seriously, because we think that by being serious, we're giving it respect. But if you think about being serious, it doesn't always benefit you. There's a way to seeming like quote unquote take things seriously without being super serious. If you kind of see the difference there, you can still have fun, but still, like, I really care about something, but I choose to have fun. And I certainly agree with what you said earlier about seeing the parents who can push the young ones a little bit away from the fun and into you must win and you must be the best. And there's a time for that, and it's not when they're young. When they're young, they should just be running around, bouncing off the walls, jumping off the bottom of the pool, doing flips, whatever.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little about, you kind of make swimming seem not as much of a game as football and basketball. So I have a theory to make swimming more exciting. I was disappointed in one thing you did. When you broke the 2012 London, you broke the 200-meter breaststroke, and the first thing you do is hug your opponent. See, I'm coming from a football, baseball, basketball background, so I think you should have just talked shit, and you incorporate shit talking and swimming, and then that way it makes it more exciting and more of a fun game.
Well, I know, like, women's sports women's swimming on that level is a very different vibe. It's like funny to watch the men and how they kind of handle themselves pre-race, and then the women and how they, especially if one of your teammates is in the race with you beforehand, like, it's very comforting for me, it was always very comforting to know, like, this is a very high stress moment, and, like, we're in this together. Obviously I'm competing against you, but we're not, like, there was never for me any resentment towards who the people were that I was racing. And so, especially for teammates and especially people that, were working hard beside me and just to kind of, I think, that hug or that celebration, it's like this, like, thank goodness it's over.
Really?
All that fear that was leading up to it and all that. So it's just kind of sharing this moment, and especially if they did well as well, if they had a personal best, if they won a medal, it's just good to share that. And maybe that's more of a female perspective than, but, there are females that are super competitive and trash talking, maybe, I don't know, but for me it was just, a happiness to share in that moment.
Okay. Do you think, well, you mentioned the difference between men's swimming and female swimming. The men's swimming, do you think, you say it's a lot more serious and less together? Is that toxic? Do you think that's toxic masculinity?
Again, this is a couple of years back when I was competing, so it's not that I would say the women were just further into like supporting each other more so than the men who might have like an I can do it on my own masculinity kind of thing. Not to say it's a bad thing. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of ways where, let me think of how to say this properly. There's a lot of ways that, you know, taking care of yourself as a human might not necessarily be doing what's best for yourself as a sport. Like, you don't want to be too lovey-dovey and like, we're in it together, you know? But then again, like, for me, it didn't really work to go on the side of super competitive and do it on your own, because that was like, I think in general, since you brought up masculine and feminine, you know, it's not just about male female, but we all have masculine and feminine energies and working within us, and I think sports in general are very masculine things, so much so that, you know, after finishing competing, it took me a long time to accept some of the softer elements of life and self-care and so on and so forth. I think that's getting a little off topic, but the point, I think there is a little bit of difference in the masculine and feminine energies for sure.
Yeah, so I would actually like to talk a little bit about the sports when it comes to masculine versus feminine. And, you know, I really like one of the pictures on your Instagram. It's a picture of a ballet, someone who's in ballet, and the picture of their feet. And it's a great photo showing how hard ballet dancers are, and how much they work towards those goals. And you see the pain in them, yet those are not shown on those types of sports like that are not shown on ESPN, but yet we have cornhole and then bowling. Do you think female sports that females are involved in don't get enough view?
I mean, going off of just you saying that something like ballet is not viewed as frequently as something like football.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. I think absolutely. I don't watch a lot of sports, so again, I'm not sure I can answer that this like fully, but yeah, I think there is absolutely so much, you know, grit in a sport like ballet. The pain, the endurance, and like doing it all with a smile and doing it all in the most graceful way possible. You know, I think when it comes to viewership of sports, especially something like ESPN, it's, I think, geared a lot around this kind of rowdy fan mentality. And it would be hard to imagine a rowdy fan drinking beers and like cheering on a ballet, you know, like. So I think it's hard to say. You know, obviously the fans of certain sports know where to find them, but obviously if it's a sport like soccer, you know, where there are male and female, then absolutely it should be completely equal viewership, pay, all of the above, you know, because the sport is the sport, and it's amazing to see what, you know, both men and women are able to do with their bodies and for the sake of the sport.
Yeah, you know, it's really important to try and keep it even of both male and female sports, because you know what, even I'm the worst of this, because I could easily name you almost all tell you about all the matchups in the March Madness this year, but I only know the winner. The only team I know that was good in the NCAA for the women's was Baylor, the winners, I believe, and that's something that as a sports journalist I should be better about.
Yeah, absolutely. You should.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love to talk shit about ESPN. So do you think ESPN, since I'm the person that gets their content, that they're not pushing it enough?
I mean, you tell me. I don't know. I'm not a viewer, so you tell me. I mean, just by you asking that question, I would say yes, they're not pushing it enough, because if you're the average viewer and you don't see it, then there's your answer.
Well, the most classic thing is that even I'm sure you know who Zion Williamson is. If you do. Nope.
No, I don't.
Okay. Oh, so you're really, really out of the sports world.
I am.
Okay, well, you know what? I'd actually like to dive into that a little. So right now, it seems like, do you have a farm? Like.
Do I have a farm? No, I don't. I have a friend who has an animal sanctuary where he rescue animals. If that's where you saw the pictures of cows and chickens. And,
Okay. So, what is that just something that you've always been interested in and were like, fuck the technology, fuck all this just materialism and just move out and just kind of be left at peace? Was that always a goal in mind?
It's definitely something I'm drawn towards. I'm not fully that disconnected, as I still am
Mhm.
somewhat involved with sports, not just through my business and what we're trying to do to help young athletes with Rise.
Mhm.
So there still is obviously that connection, but I am drawn to the more quiet and simple elements of life. That's for sure. I've always deeply loved animals. I've been vegan for years and years, and
Mhm.
just learning about both the negative aspects on our health, on our sports performance, on the environment. I mean, you name it, let alone how animals are treated. So, it's definitely been a big passion of mine, and just enjoyed learning about both the industries of, big dairy, big meat, all these,
Mhm.
the way the industry both markets their health, so in
Yeah.
quotes, how healthy their items are, but also the effect of
Mhm.
what we're told to eat and why, and it doesn't really make sense. So just uncovering that has been definitely a big
Mhm.
passion of mine, and animals, are it's such a magical thing to be able to kind of step outside of a big city or step outside
Yeah.
of the hustle bustle or the grind
Mhm.
or all these things that force us to really live in our egos and like live in this
Mhm.
like hustle or die kind of lifestyle. And when you step outside of that, you realize it's not just like emptiness that's
Mhm.
outside of the hustle. It's not just lazy to not have, like, there's so much subtlety, so much to learn from
Yeah.
nature, from animals. There's so much to learn from just sitting on your own. I mean, this day and age, everyone's talking about meditation, so I know
Mhm.
you get it. Like, to sit on your own is actually productive. It's not unproductive. And so something about, having lived in and breathed a sport that was really intense, that was
Mhm.
very much about pushing myself endlessly, about not listening to how I feel, because how I feel is like, ouch, this hurts, I want to stop.
Mhm.
Learn, like, shoving all those things down. I definitely started to crave understanding who is beneath all of that once that was all done. So yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely enjoyed um, the so-called simpler things in life.
Yeah. Well, wow, there's so many things I want to go into. So, the first one from that is this year I'm taking AP Environmental Science, and I actually didn't realize how much a piece of shit humans are. Like, it really, whether it's digging for coal or the amount of water we use for let me see, cows and just agriculture, that it's an issue that people unless you educate yourself with it won't know
Mm-hmm.
unless you kind of seek that information. I mean, I really, there's a video being shown to us in apes about water being in Colorado, about water being so horribly polluted with lead that it caught on fire. You could put a lighter to it
Mm-hmm.
and the water would catch on fire. So there,
Wow.
yeah. So you'll hear about the really big things like Flint, Michigan, but you won't hear about this small town in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I think it is important to, even though me myself, I'm not a vegan and will never be, but it is important for the average Samaritan to be much better about these issues.
It is, and I think we're in a time when people are seeking out more
Mm-hmm.
information. They
Yeah.
are self-educating, and that's definitely a trend. I mean, you look at Netflix and the
Yeah.
documentaries there. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that could be a university of knowledge, and so I think we're in a shifting age where we're kind of moving away from this just like put your head down, stay in your job for 40 years,
Mm-hmm.
like do what you're told. And as a culture, we've been shifting and are more so than ever in a place where, like, don't tell me what to do. I'm not listening to you. I want my
Mm-hmm.
own education. I
Yeah.
want to know what's actually in my milk and not
Mm-hmm.
just drink it because they say it's good for you. Disclaimer, it's not good for you. It's like
Hot take.
people as a general are questioning
Mm-hmm.
everything, which is so wonderful to see. And it's great to see that people are becoming more open to things like vegan options. Not to say, like you said, I'll never be vegan. That's fine, but
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, doesn't mean that if you're not vegan that you're chowing down on like a double dose of meat and dairy in
Mm-hmm.
every single meal. Like there is an in
Exactly.
between that
Yeah.
is much more healthy than either option.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just about people being open to, you know, vegetables are good for you. You look at
Yeah.
all these fad diets and all, you know, it's like you don't have to just do one diet. There's no one correct
Mm-hmm.
diet. But if you look at pretty much all of them, the common denominator is eat more vegetables, drink water, and
Mm-hmm.
like rest.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, so yeah, going back to my point that culture is changing.
Oh, definitely.
We're stepping away from a place where we just listen to big organizations and corporations and, you know, systems like medical
Mm-hmm.
system, food. All these things are coming into question, which is fantastic. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of conspiracy theory and this
Mm-hmm.
and that. And not that everything you watch is correct, but it just, if anything, it just makes you question and wonder, like, oh, is what I've been taking for granted to be true,
Mm-hmm.
is it actually true? You know, it's now my responsibility to answer that for myself instead of just listening to somebody else.
Yeah, see, I agree with that 100% because it feels like throughout these documentaries I've watched throughout the year, the bad guy are always supposed to be the bad guy is the good guy, if that makes sense. The bad guy is always these big fucking oil companies and always the B- BPA or things that we get our messages from, and they're the ones that are telling us everything is fine. Yet there's a lot of shit out there that is not fine that you won't hear
Mm-hmm.
about, such as this little town in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
the fact that we talk about documentaries and Netflix being great for education, it is great for educating because now I know something about the environment as someone who before, I'll just be flat out honest, didn't really care and didn't pay much attention to it. Now I know. And that's the beautiful part with technology and social media that you kind of talked on a little bit before was spreading the awareness of things, whether it's an issue with water or it's an issue with slavery going in parts of parts of the world that we don't know about. Social media is so beautiful when it's used correctly because now we know something and it's as simple as literally just learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
hmm So now I kind of want to tie it back to sports a little right now. It was a good um, or a little bit of a lead way to talking about with social media what's going on with you and the Rise athletes. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a really fun journey to bring Rise Athletes to life.
Mm-hmm.
We have been about 5 years into this mission of really just empowering the next generation of youth athletes to develop what we call the athlete mindset, which it's very clear that to be a good athlete, you have to train your body, you have to go to practice, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not until these pretty elite stages of athleticism that you start to realize there's more to it than just my body. There's
Mm-hmm.
obviously nutrition, there's rest, there's mindset. And so we like to key into mindset, partially because for me it was the game changer. It changed it. It made the difference between a good swimmer and a great swimmer. And, you know, I felt like I was living proof of that because I'm not super tall or not super strong.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there was nothing physically that said, okay, this is the next, you know, I didn't look like Michael Phelps. I didn't,
Yeah.
I wasn't, you know, 6'3".
5'8".
So yes, you got it. 5'7" and a half.
Oh, Google gave you
But
one.
so yeah, we really wanted to build mindset into the foundation of youth sports and
Mm-hmm.
doing so in a fashion by involving the Olympians, most of whom are just retiring or
Mm-hmm.
have left their sport, some still competing, bringing them on board. We have a training process that, they're obviously familiar with mindset, but just kind of narrowing it in on how to bring mindset into sports, how
Mm-hmm.
to teach that to young athletes. So we train them on that, and then they connect with athletes one-on-one on our online platform for video meetings every week, so that they can mentor the young ones on mindset development. And it's been, I think, the most rewarding part of it is it's great to give back to the kids. We love, building the program and seeing the personal connections between young kids and Olympian, who becomes their big brother, big sister, their friends.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of demystifying this idea that an Olympian is like a superhuman.
Yeah.
We're just normal
Mm-hmm.
people. And at the same time, with that transition out of sports for the Olympians, that's a
Mm-hmm.
super important area that we really wanted to make sure that it doesn't go, it's not just about the kids, it's also about the transition that these Olympians are going through. Mental health is such a big talking point nowadays, and it's
Mm-hmm.
for a reason,
Yeah.
not especially, but in our case, we're talking about sports, but
Mm-hmm.
in sports, it's such a prevalent thing, especially as sports are so demanding that
Mm-hmm.
it skews your view of who you are, of
Yeah.
how you function in this world, of what your value is. Feeling like my only value is to drop 0.2 of a second,
Mm-hmm.
in a race going in circles around a pool. Like that actually doesn't define me at all.
Mm-hmm.
But we're led to think that, and so once you leave your sport, you lose so much. You lose your
Yeah.
team, you lose structure in your life, you
Mm-hmm.
lose a goal to work towards, you lose your meaning, you lose your identity, all these
Mm-hmm.
things that are really ground shaking for pretty much everyone that's gone through that transition. And for some, it's much worse than others,
Yeah.
depending on how they're coming into it. And so we really wanted to create a community around supporting these athletes as they're
Mm-hmm.
transitioning. And mindset is a great place to start, because the tools that we teach are the tools that were utilized to get me out of bed when I was so depressed that I
Yeah.
felt like I didn't have anything to live for, and
Mm-hmm.
helped me to reshape who I was and what I could do and what I wanted to do and what my value was and all these things. And that's all mindset. So the same tools are being taught to help different areas within the sport, essentially just bringing this mindfulness movement into sports itself.
Yeah. I love talking about post athlete depression because it's such a prevalent thing that nobody really, especially even a lot of sports fans, don't really understand what it's the mental state of an athlete. And I think one of the greatest examples of this was in the WWE, which is still a sport. There's a very famous
Sure.
wrestler back in the day named Jake the Snake, and he had a Netflix documentary come out that displayed what goes on in the life of an athlete, and he would talk about going after millions of people were watching and thousands of people were screaming his name. He would go back into his hotel room and just feel like the loneliest person in the world, especially with WWE when you have your kind of identity. You know, what was that like when all of a sudden it's 2012, you're breaking world records and you're around the greatest athletes. I'm sure you met crazy A-list celebrities that loved you, and then it kind of feels like a couple years later, do these people still like me? Is that something that runs through during that post-athlete depression of do these people still care about me?
It's not necessarily do they still care about me.
Mm-hmm.
It's why should I care about myself?
Wow. Okay.
Because I'm not doing what other people want me to do anymore.
Interesting. Okay.
I would say it's more of a self-inflicted rather than like, do they still love me? Because they do. They still know my name, which is cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an introvert. I don't want people calling my name.
Really?
It's great that they did for Rebecca the swimmer, but like
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca the person doesn't want to be Rebecca the swimmer, most of the time. But because Rebecca the swimmer was 100% of my identity, maybe 99.9% of my identity at the time, all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. You don't have that identity anymore, and it takes a lot of work, self-work, to be okay with yourself without anything else. Nowadays, everybody, not always, for as long as we've been in modern culture, it's like you're defined by what you do. You're defined by what you do, where you live, mainly what you do. First question people ask you when they're like, hi, what's your name? What do you do? It's like as if that's going to summarize who I am as a person. And so it's that stripping of what I do that causes that pain, at least in the phase when it's gone. And at least I'm just speaking from my experience. I'm sure that other people have experienced it in a totally different way. So I want to acknowledge that as well. But there is an immense loneliness to it, like you mentioned as well, even in the competition phase. I felt like I just want people to see me for who I am and not just for being an athlete. I want people, when I meet them, randomly, or I want to make friends with people, I want to know that they're friends with me because they like me, not because I am an Olympian. You know what I mean? It almost separates you from your real identity, which is that you just are. You are a human. You are normal. You are like everybody else. And to kind of elevate yourself beyond that, I'm better than, I'm bigger than, I'm more important than, that just separates you from your true identity of just like, I am. It's not even that I'm Rebecca. I am. I'm a human. I'm living. I'm breathing. And that is my identity, So to come back to that takes a lot of work. For me, it was, the typical, meditation, self-work, psychology, learning a lot about all of these elements. And I found a lot of rehabilitation of my mind by creating Rise. And that's why it's so valuable to me, is that I am putting into this program what I needed to become more human, to become more of myself. And I want these kids to understand from an early age that you're a person who swims. We've heard that before. You're not a swimmer. You are a person who swims. You are not an athlete. You're a person who does athletic things. And there's a really important distinction in there that takes time to build and understand.
Yeah, so you talk a lot about the athlete mindset. One of the people who I see you follow on Instagram is one of my favorite humans in the world, David Goggins. And to give viewers a little bit of a brush up on David Goggins, he makes Chuck Norris kind of look like a bitch. I mean, he has a poker-sized hole in the size of a poker chip in his heart, and still runs ultra marathons, and which are 100-mile races, and has done was pretty much classic American dream story, where he grew up fat and just felt worthless, was picked on, and had to deal with loads of racism, and ends up being a Navy SEAL, and then along the journey doing many other things. One of his best accomplishments was breaking the pull-up record, most pull-ups done in a day, which was like over 2,000. It was insane. But yeah, I really was driven to him because everything he said at the time was just so shocking to me when it comes to really the mindset. And I really like the cookie jar he talks about. Are you familiar with this at all?
I'm not familiar with the cookie jar, no.
Okay, so the cookie jar is for when you're in some real deep shit in a tough situation, and it's things that from the past that you've been able to overcome to get you through the situation you're in. So a good example in the cookie jar is this is not me personally, but this could be example is getting over just a family member's death. So if I could get over my family member's death, then I can do this next thing because I'm that strong of a person. And I think it's really important, especially for athletes, to have this, to know that if I did this one thing in sports, then I could do this in life. So if I'm able to break world records and be in the 2011 Swimmer of the Year?
I think 10 and 11, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so back to back Swimmer of the Year, I can also start a business and I can also be happy for who I am.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've utilized that tool, and there's an important distinction because it can often feel like, well, it was easy to swim because
Hmm.
that's like I knew it. I knew swimming.
Yeah.
I got it.
Hmm.
I know how to push myself in swimming, but I don't know anything about business. I don't know anything about the things I'm now trying to accomplish. So there's an important distinguishing element that in order to utilize things that you've put in your cookie jar,
Hmm.
you have to develop the translating ability. So you have to
Yeah.
be able to translate that, how I work hard in the pool utilizes my
Hmm.
body, but how I work hard in my business utilizes my mind. And I
Yeah.
have to translate that somehow because I know from personal experience, sitting at a computer all day, I will feel no sense of accomplishment
Hmm.
whatsoever until I get my body moving, until my body is exhausted. Because that's
Hmm.
how I've been trained. Success equals physical pain,
Yeah.
right? It's
Hmm.
just the way it is. And so you have to go through this translation period where you
Hmm.
translate, well, it feels different though, and it looks different, and I can utilize certain pieces of my motivation from swimming, but maybe not all of them because they don't
Mm.
fully apply. So yeah, but I know that even within within one category, so within swimming, it's easy to utilize your cookie jar and build that up, and I definitely did that a lot. I remember I was even one time I was considering retiring after 2008, after I
Mm.
kind of going through my first round of post-Olympic depression,
Yeah.
and just like, okay, well, I won a gold medal, I broke a world record, like, what is
Hmm.
there else to do? And I was debating, do I stay or do I go? And I did a trip out to Hawaii, and it was
Hmm.
with an event, and I hiked up, was it like Diamond Head or Diamond something, right, by Waikiki there, and I remember going up, and I was a little bit out of shape at this point, and I was just like it's just straight uphill for a
Hmm.
long time. And I remember thinking, like, okay, I want to do it. I think I'm physically tough enough, and if I can do this climb right
Hmm.
now and not like stop, and like if I can just keep pushing myself mentally, then I know I have what it takes mentally to keep pushing myself to the next Olympics to achieve my goals and so on and so forth. So that was a good example of this cookie jar and like putting things into a box. But I think you do need to develop this translation skills, especially when you're moving from different elements, like from physical to mental.
Yeah. So I know your time's important, so I have two final questions. So what's harder, what you just talked about, mental or physical? Yeah.
Um, I would say mental. Mental is way
Mhm.
harder. Mostly to explain my answer, everything physical is mental. To
Mm.
do 2,000 pull-ups, I'm
Yeah.
sure David Goggins can tell you that was all mental. Like
Mhm.
getting up again when you're exhausted is all mental. So the mental is definitely more challenging.
Okay. So final question. Now that you're settled down and have this Rise program where you're mentoring athletes, is it more fun to learn or to teach?
Well, in the case of the program, they kind of go hand in hand.
Mm.
We're
Okay.
almost learning together. It's not as much teaching as it is mentoring is the word we
Mm.
use, because I'm not here. It's not school. It's not. There's no curriculum. Well, there's loose curriculum, but there's
Mhm.
no checking things off the box. But so I would say it's more fun to learn, and it's a
Mhm.
constant learning process. So that's good.
All right. I lied. Actual last question. What have you learned about yourself the most through the Rise program?
to give to sports
Mm.
than what others might expect, or what I think others expect of me. So basically, that I have more to give, and that it's not just about swimming in circles.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for being the first guest ever, and
Thank you.
I hope this will definitely not be the last time we talk.
Sounds good. I hope so too.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
All right. Well, that was the interview with Rebecca Soni. Thank you for tuning in, and there will be many more episodes just like this on the way. Follow my Instagram at Matt_Weiner_. Weiner is WEINER. And thank you.